they're talking about the climate emergency as everyone is seeing the price of gas, the price of food, the price of fertilizer, which means there's a long tail to that. And as fertilizer is really expensive, we're harvesting or eating last year's harvest of food right now. Going into this next harvest, guess what? Ask any farmer. By the way, we have any farmers out there? I know we do. If you want to tell us a little bit about what you're seeing, please let us know. Call in, because food's about to get a lot more expensive. Housing is looking really shaky right now. And with all of those factors, the emergency is CO2 emissions. These people are out of their minds. We've got this upcoming speech from Joe Biden. He's going to be at a former coal plant in Massachusetts that is now the site of what will be a connection to offshore windmills. And one of my favorite things, by the way, Clay, about all the windmill talk is Nantucket, for anyone who doesn't know, is an enclave of the richest people in America and in some cases the world. The Google founder's house is there. You know, Larry Ellison has a place in Nantucket.
Have you ever been?
Yeah. I paid more money than I made in like a month to be in the smallest room I think available on the island at the time, and I'm not kidding. It's a very pricey place to be. It's beautiful though, but there are all these complaints because they set up the super rich people, you know, and some of the ladies who lunch, who, you know, they've got the billionaire husbands and they're bored and they're like, let's just set up some windmills. Turns out now you got this giant thing that makes a droning noise, it makes kind of a humming noise, that is a Cuisinart for migratory fowl. It just chops up birds all the time. No one ever talks about that. It's actually true. You know, ducks, quack,
really
they're
funny.
just getting their heads lopped off by these things. Massacred. Okay, there's feathers flying everywhere. It's crazy.
Yeah.
And they're like, this is ugly to look at. And so they don't want them near their homes. They don't want them offshore. And there's been this huge fights over this in Nantucket. But trust me, if you live near the ocean and, you know, you're in a more middle class, more sort of normal economically neighborhood, they're going to be piling up the windmills off of your coast. You're going to be seeing them in the distance. No more just staring off at the beautiful horizon. Biden's going to be giving this speech. And it turns out he's not declaring a climate emergency, which, what was that even going to be? And it's amazing, Clay, at a time when people are more concerned about inflation, the price of gas, the price of food than anything else, the libs who are writing Biden speeches for him and apparently giving him some performance-enhancing drugs, which, I mean, have we confirmed that that's actually happening? Because people are talking about that a lot. They want to lecture us about the Green New Deal.
There's so many things. The idea of Biden being on performance-enhancing drugs and still being as bad at his job as he is, what would he be without the performance-enhancing drugs? This is like somebody taking steroids and still not being good enough to make their high school baseball team. Like, you really suck if you're on steroids and you can't make the high school baseball team. That's Biden right now. 1%, Buck, of the electorate in a recent New York Times poll said that the climate is the number one issue for them in the 2022 elections. 3% of Democrats. I keep talking about this because it feels as if the Biden administration is trying to tank for the number one overall draft pick. Even Democrats are saying, hey, dude, let's focus on inflation. Let's focus on crime. Let's focus on the border. Let's focus on the things that impact me on a day-to-day basis. 3% of Democrats say the climate is their biggest concern. 1% of overall voters. Hardly any independents. Buck, who is advising Joe Biden? Theoretically, they can look at the data. Now, the reason why he's not announcing a climate emergency, evidently, is because they are holding out hope. Did you see this in Politico? That Joe Manchin may change his mind and be willing, if the August 10th inflation numbers, when the newest numbers come out for July, are not as bad as they have been, to potentially sign on still to a climate bill. So that is what I have read for why he's not calling it a climate emergency. No one is worried in the grand scheme of things about the climate when inflation is 9.1%. And when you see this, They see the numbers. They're looking at the same data and polling that we are. Does Joe Biden, in addition to being the worst president in any of our lives, also have the dumbest advisors in any of our lives in the White House? I mean, what are they? I don't even understand their game plan here, traveling to Massachusetts, a state that he's already going to win, and going to a windmill factory or whatever it is. He feels like Don Quixote right now.
Speaking of Biden advisors and their capabilities, White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre is trying to sell the American people on Biden has to do all these executive orders because it's so warm right now. She's actually saying this, folks, and it's not going to actually convince anyone.
The impacts of extreme weather are intensifying across the globe, including here in the United States. No one is immune from climate change. It's why the president has been rallying the world to take the decisive action needed in this decade to tackle the climate change, the climate crisis. It's also why the president is committed to taking aggressive action to tackle climate change and made clear if the Senate won't act, he will.
Okay, a couple things. First of all, it is not the job of the president to usurp the role of the legislature and say they won't do, because I don't have the votes in my party, what I want, so I'm just going to write it on a piece of paper and pretend that's the system we have. Obama was the one who started this, by the way. He was I've got a pen and a phone, I'm going to do it myself, I'm going to go it alone, which, yeah, that's violating a constitutional separation of powers. And Obama lost in the courts many times on this. People forget this. The courts were like,
and so has Biden.
Yeah,
I mean, he's tried to do all sorts of things. The OSHA extensions, of the ability to kick people out.
I should look up, team. Greg, could you find for me the number of times that Obama executive orders were struck down in the courts? Because I think it was almost a dozen. I mean, it was 9, 10, something like that. But they're saying this right now, Clay. This is what's amazing. They're talking about the climate emergency as everyone is seeing the price of gas, the price of food, the price of fertilizer, which means there's a long tail to that. And as fertilizer is really expensive, we're harvesting or eating last year's harvest of food right now. Going into this next harvest, guess what? Ask any farmer. By the way, we have any farmers out there? I know we do. If you want to tell us a little bit about what you're seeing, please let us know. Call in. Because food's about to get a lot more expensive. Housing is looking really shaky right now. And with all of those factors, the emergency is CO2 emissions. These people are out of their minds.
Also, Buck, Biden didn't have anything on his public schedule the past 2 days. He didn't do anything. And then he comes back, literally was not making any arguments that I think KGP there said, oh, he's been working really hard behind the scenes. Come on. I mean, the guy has been sleeping for 2 days, probably after coming back from the Middle East. I'm sure he's tired. He's 79 now, I think about to turn 80, right? Like a couple of days after the midterms. And we're talking about him going to address the climate crisis.